Namaskar. Well, friends, I heartily welcome you all to Bhim Bhashya, my audio-visual podcast series on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. This audio-visual podcast series has 54 short speeches of about 20 minutes each on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, unraveling as many as 25 different dimensions of his multifaceted genius. Friends, this podcast series is focused on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, his thoughts, his actions, his philosophy, and above all, the grand vision that he had seen for our nation. That is what this podcast series is all about. So let's proceed. Well, friends, this episode 48, is the 10th episode elaborating Dr. Ambedkar's role as the principal architect of the Indian Constitution. In this episode 48, I continue my presentation about the major facets of the Indian Constitution. In this episode in particular, I am going to speak about the organs of the Indian state: the executive, union and state, legislature, union and states, and of course the judiciary. The Constitution of India envisages separation of powers among the organs of state, while at the same time providing a harmonious relationship among them. All the organs of state have been made accountable to the authority of the Constitution. Each organ of the state, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, is the creation of the Constitution and draws its existence from the Constitution. It is the Constitution which defines and controls their powers and regulates their relationship with one another and the people. As a custodian of the interest of the nation, each organ is accountable to the people in one way or the other. As the supreme representative and legislative body, our parliament has been accorded a preeminent position in the constitutional setup. Yet, the legislature has to meet specified constitutional requirements and function within the bounds of a written constitution. The legislature is accountable to the people through elections. The accountability of the executive is ensured through the provision of its being collectively responsible to the popular House of Legislature. And in a way, the judiciary too is accountable to the people, as its sole responsibility is to protect the Constitution as the custodian of the rights of the people. It is envisaged as an institution which regulates the unwarrantable use of power to govern our country. A fine balance has to be maintained. The legislature, the executive, and the judiciary have to respect each other's jurisdictions and work in unison to achieve constitutional ideals. Even when there are occasions when frictions arise, it could be addressed within the constitutional framework. Nature of our federal structure. Article 1 of the Constitution describes India, that is Bharat, as a union of states rather than a federation of states. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, while introducing the draft constitution, explained why the term Union of States was preferred over the Federation of States. The Indian Federation is union, quote unquote, because it is indestructible, unquote, he said. The decision of the Constituent Assembly to have a federal structure in the Constitution with a strong center was occasioned also by the circumstances in which it was taken. A strong central government was eminently necessary for handling the situation arising out of communal riots that preceded and accompanied the partition, for meeting the food crisis, for settling the refugees, and for maintaining national unity, and for promoting social and economic development, which was thwarted under the colonial rule. The Constitution of India provides neither purely federal nor purely unitary system. It is, in fact, a combination of both. It normally works as a federal system. However, provisions are there to convert it into a unitary or quasi-federal system under specified exceptional circumstances. It is perhaps this element of flexibility that has been a unique one in our framework to accommodate the wide variety of center-state relationship over the years. Both the Union and the states derive their authority from the Constitution, and the states cannot secede from the Union. Unlike in United States, in India, there is only one Indian citizenship. Every power, legislative, executive, or judicial, whether it belongs to the Union or to the states, is subordinate to and controlled by the Constitution. The Constitution has clearly specified the legislative and administrative powers, with the Supreme Court having the power to guard this distribution of powers. The seventh schedule of the Indian Constitution contains 3 lists of subjects. The subjects listed in the Union list can only be legislated upon by the Union Parliament. The ones in the state list only by the state legislatures, and those in the concurrent list come within the purview of both the center as well as states. But in cases of a conflict between the Union and the state legislation, it is the Union law that prevails. Union and the state executive. The Constitution of India adopted the British model of cabinet system of responsible government in preference to other models such as the presidential executive form of government. Since India is a republic, the Constitution provides for a President of India. The President is the nominated head of the Union Executive, and the Prime Minister is the head of the Council of Ministers, who is the real executive. Detailed provisions are made in the Constitution to see that President does not arrogate to himself or herself any real power. However, in dissolving the Parliament, the President may not act on the advice of the Prime Minister if he or she has lost majority support in the lower house. The President is indirectly elected for a term of 5 years and can be removed on the basis of impeachment proceedings brought against him or her by the Parliament. A provision is also made for the post of a Vice President indirectly elected who would serve as the head of the state in the absence of the President. The Constitution also lays down the qualification, method of election, and removal and powers and functions of the Vice President. The Constitution prescribes that there shall be a Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to assist and advise the President. The President appoints the Prime Minister, and on the advice of the Prime Minister, the other ministers are appointed. Generally, the President invites the leader of the majority party in Lok Sabha to form the government, who chooses his other council of ministers. President has to act in accordance with the advice of the council of ministers. The Prime Minister occupies a key position in the government. He symbolizes the ruling power structure in the country. The executive in the states is organized on the same pattern as the union government. Hence, as in the union, the government in the states is also organized on the parliamentary model. Head of the state is called the governor, who is constitutional head of state. The chief executive of the state government is called the chief minister, who is the counterpart of the Prime Minister of India in the state. There is a council of ministers for each of the states, as in the union. The state government is a true replica of the union government within the jurisdiction of each state. This helps the states to draw examples and inspiration from the working of the union government in almost every field of activity. The executive power of the state is vested in the governor, who is appointed by the president and who holds office during the pleasure of the president. The vesting of the entire executive power of the state in the governor shows that he or she occupies the same constitutional position within the state as the president does with respect to the government of India. Let's turn to judiciary now. The Supreme Court stands at the apex of the Indian judicial hierarchy with effective power to supervise and control the working of the entire system. Below the Supreme Courts are the High Courts located in each state, and besides High Courts, we have District Court and subordinate courts. The Supreme Court's jurisdiction is of four kinds: original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction, advisory jurisdiction, and review jurisdiction. The Supreme Court has exclusive jurisdiction in a dispute between the union and a state, or between one state and another, or between a group of states and other. The Supreme Court is also the guardian of the fundamental rights of the citizens of India. Unlike many countries with federal constitutions, India has a single judicial system. Explaining the nature of this system, Dr. Ambedkar had said in the Constituent Assembly, and I quote, "The Indian Federation, though a dual polity, has no dual judiciary at all," unquote. The High Court and the Supreme Court form one single integrated judiciary having jurisdiction and providing remarks in all cases of the constitutional law, the civil law, or the criminal law. Let's now turn to union and state legislatures. The Union of India is composed of 28 states and 8 union territories, as specified in the first schedule of the Constitution. The territory of the Union is divided among the states and the Union territory. A law made by a state legislature can be applicable only in the territory of that state. The Union Parliament can make laws for the whole or any part of territory of India. The Constitution provides for a threefold distribution of legislative powers between the Union and the states. List 1 on the Union list contains nearly 100 subjects over which Parliament has exclusive power to make laws. List 2, or the state list, includes approximately 70 entries over which state legislatures have got exclusive power of legislation. Then comes the list 3, or the concurrent list, which contains, roughly speaking, about 50 items on which both the Parliament and the state legislatures can make laws. While in their own respective spheres, as allotted by the Constitution, the Parliament as well as the state legislatures enjoy complete autonomy. The scheme of distribution of powers emphasizes the general predominance of Parliament in the legislative field. Even in the spheres exclusively reserved for the states, the Parliament is authorized to legislate under certain circumstances. The Parliament also enjoys the power to legislate for implementing any treaty, agreement, or convention with any country or any decision made at an international conference, association, and other body on any subject, even if it falls in the state list. The Parliament may enter the state list by invitation as well. If 2 or more state legislatures consider it desirable that any matters within their executive legislative competence should be regulated by the parliamentary legislation and pass resolutions to that effect, the Parliament can undertake the necessary litigation. The Parliament of India consists of the President and 2 houses, the Rajya Sabha, which is the Council of States, and the Lok Sabha, which is House of the People. The 2 houses of Parliament enjoy co-equal powers and status in all spheres excepting financial matters, and in regard to the responsibility of the Council of Ministers, which are exclusively in the domain of Lok Sabha. Accordingly, the following limitations have been placed on the power of Rajya Sabha. 1. A money bill cannot be introduced in Rajya Sabha. 2. The Rajya Sabha has no power either to reject or amend a money bill. It can only make recommendations on the money bill. If such a bill is not returned to the Lok Sabha within a period of 14 days, the bill shall be deemed to have been passed by both the houses at the expiration of the said period in the form in which it was passed by the Lok Sabha. Whether a particular bill is a money bill or not is to be decided by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha may discuss the annual financial statement. It has no power to vote on the demand for grants. The Rajya Sabha has no power to pass a vote of no confidence in the Council of Ministers. It should not, however, be taken to mean that Rajya Sabha is less important or has been given a secondary position in relation to Lok Sabha. The powers of the Rajya Sabha are at par with those of the Lok Sabha in case of non-money bills. Every non-financial measure must be passed by both the houses individually before it can become an act. It has equal powers with the Lok Sabha in important matters. The structure of the legislature at the state level is almost similar to that of the union legislature. A major difference is that only a few states have two houses, while most of the states have a single house legislature. At the state level, the governor and the single or two houses constitute the legislature. Now, there is a special note on Parliament as a conduit making the vision of the Constitution a reality. Parliament of India plays a direct and conditioning role in bringing about social change and effecting socio-economic transformation. Being the people's supreme representative institution, Parliament is the lifeline of all the governmental activities. Parliamentary activity as a whole, that is legislating, controlling the finances and overseeing the executive branch, covers the entire spectrum of development. It is on the floor of the House that certain primary processes are set into motion which have the capacity to open the way to orderly changes and innovations in public life. Since in the parliamentary form of government, the executive is the creation of the legislature and the legislature exercises control over the executive, no government can afford to ignore the directions given by the legislature. Parliament, as the apex democratic institution in the country, has been working as an instrument of translating the constitutional values and ideals into action by enacting laws from time to time towards building a better future for this society. Mahatma Gandhi had once visualized the new Constitution of India in terms of universal values applied to the specific and special conditions of India. As early as in 1931, Gandhiji had written, and I quote him, "I shall strive for a constitution which will release India from the thraldom and patronage. I shall work for an India in which the poorest shall feel that it is their country in whose making they have an effective voice. An India in which there is no high class or low class of people. An India in which all communities shall live in perfect harmony. Unquote. The Constitution of India empowers the people as much as the people empower the Constitution. Dr. Ambedkar had once said, and I quote, "A constitution, no matter how well written and how detailed, would have little meaning without the right people to implement it and to live by its values." And in this, Dr. Ambedkar placed his faith in generations that would follow. Well, friends, India is the most populous country in the world today. Recently, we have surpassed China in terms of population. What is holding our 140 crore plus people together? What is binding them together despite so many divisions of caste and creeds, religions and regions, languages and culture? What is binding them together as one entity? It is nothing but the Constitution of India. Friends, we have every right to feel proud today as our Constitution is recognized all over the world for democratic and secular values, as well as for establishing an inclusive social order. Well, friends, with this episode, we complete the discussion of Dr. Ambedkar's role as the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, as the man who shaped the Indian Republic. We have done that in 10 episodes, episode 39 to episode 48. From the next episode onwards, we'll turn to remaining dimensions of Dr. Ambedkar's multifaceted genius. Let me conclude this session here. But before I leave, I would like to remind you, if you like this audio-visual podcast series, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to it. So long until we meet again real soon. Thank you very much. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.